Thanks all for playing with me, even if you just did it in your imagination. The power of movements. Can't talk about anger without talking about movements. It just goes hand in hand. And just extra information for you. The kidney and the bladder that we worked with a lot yesterday help to connect to our feet. In particular, that bladder runs on the side of the foot. I think I mentioned that yesterday. And that kidney meridian goes deep into that big toe and rises up the inner foot. Sometimes the bladder and the kidney like a little feet movement to help to support their integration. We also worked with how is it you walk on this earth. Yes, this gives the feet a chance to actually play with that and express that. So I invite you to play with movement in any way, shape, or form that calls to you. That might just be in your mind's eye, and that's perfect. The mind doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. However, there's something to doing it physically too. So if you can and you're open to it, I'm going to suggest that as room for experimentation and play to help integrate the session today. Okay. All right, everybody, welcome to today's day in transforming emotions into energy. Session number 2 is with transforming anger into movement and momentum, as I mentioned. My name's Allison Bachmeyer, for those of you who I'm new to. And in terms of the material today, we're going to, as usual, be doing a little bit of left brain information, but I'll likely end up weaving some more pieces into it through the session. There's something about that transmission of information that seems to happen just a little bit easier when we can experience it in the session at times too. So you'll see a bit of a balance, just like we did in yesterday's session. And thank you all for all the sharing that you've been doing. That's amazing. I saw all the stuff and I've heard all your feedback and who you shared it to, and just the deepest of gratitude. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So for today, liver, gallbladder, these are the meridians that process anger, and they work with, in Chinese medicine terms, the wood element. And the wood element is, well, for some of us, kind of the phase that we're in the seasons right now. Well, we're probably just at the end, really, of it. We have an odd spring in Saskatchewan. We get 2 or 3 days usually of spring between winter and summer. It's a quick turnaround here. So if you blink, you miss spring. But the understanding for our wood element is that energy of spring is what gives rise to birth, to growth, to new life. So perfect tie-in for the work that we did yesterday with some of that birthing imagery that was coming, and that energy that was giving rise to potentially some newness in life. Birth is just a metaphor. Body Talk is big on metaphors. And I didn't mention it yesterday, but for those of you who are new to Body Talk, if you haven't heard of it before, you can find out a lot more information in a couple of spots. There's the international website, bodytalksystem.com. There's my website, vibranttransformation.com. And on that, I have a series of videos, and you just click on the tabs about Body Talk. They're also on the YouTube channel too. You'll find them there. So for those of you who want to learn a little bit more about Body Talk, you can head there. And if you have any questions about it, feel free to let me know. And actually, while I'm on the topic of stuff like the admin side of things, I'm remembering that people were asking if they sign up for the course, do they get lifetime access to the recordings? And yes, you do. That would be the main benefit to signing up for the course. You can re-listen to all of the materials as many times as you like. Okay, back to the wood element now. So this wood element that helps to process our anger, working to give new life, new birth, new growth. Who would have thought that anger is associated with birth? Well, probably if you've given birth, you can probably relate to that. But we don't always think of, wow, I have some anger going on, and associate that with something that's trying to be born, do we? That's a bit of a tougher reach sometimes to associate that meaning. From a Chinese medicine perspective, all of the emotions are energy in motion. meaning every emotion serves a purpose to move something in your body, to do something in your body, to heal something in your body, or to give it the energy to provide that vitality that goes hand in hand with healing energy. And the wood element, in particular, as we mentioned, works with anger. So this anger is all about helping the liver and the gallbladder to move things through those organs, as well as to move anything that needs to be catalyzed as a decision, anything that needs to have a plan, anything that we need to adapt to, anything that we need to metabolize. These are all part and parcel of the same words pointing to the same energy. So how we give birth to our new ideas, our new decisions, our new plans are all tied in to this particular element. And if anger energy is getting stuck and misused because we think it's ours and it's personal and we have to carry it forth as something, as a burden or a challenge or an issue or a core belief system or whatever words we're calling it these days, the understanding is then that doesn't allow for that anger energy to do what it's meant to do, which is to give rise to new life for you, which is to create movement, which is to allow the liver and the gallbladder organs to function well. Think of what the liver does physically, helps to detox. The gallbladder does physically a lot of digestion. All of that requires anger to move. So when we feel stuck or stagnant, it's often because that anger energy has become personal and we think that it was something out there that happened to us as an attack or some other way or shape or form that we personalize this anger. Often we internalize it and we blame ourselves, and then we get angry at ourselves. So that's usually a safer way for some of us to process anger. In addition to that, anger is an interesting little beast because people tend to be afraid of anger. And so often where there's fear, there's anger. However, the beauty to that is that anger can help to move fear. So when they're found together, they actually can resolve with greater ease. It's really the gift of having the anger there to support the movement of that energy, to also support the release of the fear that often is found side by side. Now, the fear of anger, in particular, and this is a broad brushstroke, the testosterone-laden brain parts of humanity, often known as males, masculine energy. The energy there is often, I'm afraid of hurting with my anger. I'm afraid that this anger will get misused. I'm afraid that my anger may cause harm. But if we're worried about that, then it actually takes away the capacity for anger to act in a protective, healthy way, to act in a way that gives also rise to the other masculine healthy traits of not just protecting, but providing and procreating. Now, I'm stealing that little bit of knowledge and tidbit from Allison A. Armstrong. I think I mentioned her yesterday as well. She's one of my favorite teachers, to be honest with you. I really enjoy her material on all things masculine and feminine. She doesn't use those words. She speaks to it more in terms of men, women, or hunter-gatherers, but you can definitely apply that to your own internal masculine and feminine energy. So when we talk about feminine anger and their fear of their own anger, it also is typically associated with a fear of power, because women's power hasn't always been very welcomed in our modern day times, or really in a lot of historical times as well. So sometimes there's some fear of power for those reasons in the estrogen-laden portion of humanity, those brains, and females that are, well, premenopause is a little bit different than postmenopause, but maybe I won't split that hair too fine. I'll just keep it very broad and in general in terms of how we tend to see things. And these are, again, very common, broad brushstrokes. So if you're thinking that doesn't apply to you, no worries, it just doesn't resonate, and that's fine, just leave that, okay? If you're thinking, oh, that's totally me, in fact, I think I have both of those things going on, know that that's really normal, because again, we're all roughly 50-50 feminine and masculine, okay? Okay, so The last thing I can tie into the feminine piece just for now that's coming to me is you've heard likely this expression, hell hath no fury like a woman's scorns. So it's that type of powerful energy that can move through the system that's quite necessary to be here and be available when it's required. Think of when you need to mum a bear. Think of when you need to rescue a little one who might have, ran out into the street and there's a bus coming. You need some movement energy to propel you and get that kid, yeah? Or if there's anything else that's endangering the littles or yourself, there's that capacity to do what needs to be done without fear of that power. The fear of the power usually goes back into often past life energies around women being put to death for doing work in the realms of healing, whether that be witchcraft as it was labeled, whether that be growing herbs, whether that be doing some form of medicine that was found threatening, or whether it was just the fear of the power of the capacity for the feminine energy to give birth. Yeah, so there's so much wrapped up into anger energy for the masculine and the feminine. Yeah. Okay. I promise to keep these closer to the 60 to 70 minute mark. I failed a little bit on that yesterday, so we'll see how I get on today. We'll see how chatty I get here. If you have questions about any of the material, you are welcome to pop them into the chat feature. Oh, thank you. I have someone I'll honor privacy. I won't mention names, but she says, I love this class so much. This is my third time attending it. It takes so much work to be able to hold sacred space for all the emotions without judgment or fear. Thank you. You're most welcome. It's one of my favorite things to do. Yeah, I love spending time with y'all this way. So what else can I share with you about the wood element? Well, it correlates to the eyes. If you've ever heard the expression blinded with rage or blinded with anger, that ties in here. And last day, we also tied in bladder 1, which works with fear and a little bit of anger energy. Think of pissed off. Yeah, and bladder 1 acupuncture points in that inner canthus in the inner corner of the eye. So that's pretty powerful too to correlate in here. And in general, anger is supportive of also giving rise to tears and the expression of our tears coming out obviously from that inner corner of the eye. That's where your tear duct is found. So all of these correlations between yesterday and today are not surprising because of that fear, anger, powerhouse couple combination that is often seen in the body-mind. Now, the other piece to anger that I really need to mention, I feel, is that it helps to expand. It helps to expand. Without any anger energy, you would just stay small and tight and maybe even contracted, and you wouldn't feel like you could reach out and expand into your environment to get your needs met. Yeah, anger energy helps you to actually get your needs met. It doesn't mean that it has to be expressed harshly, verbally, but it allows, when it's not being perceived as something that you have to do or that it's personal, anger energy just simply moves through the body to expand and reach out and grab your water bottle or whatever it might be that your need happens to be present to in this moment. Now, the yin portion, the feminine portion, is the liver, and the liver meridian and the yin gives rise to certain areas of the body where we can more commonly see anger get stored if we're not expressing that emotion in the moment. And sometimes we don't do that. Well, often we don't do that because we don't feel like there's a safe space to express that or to release that. Okay? So then that anger or whatever the emotion may be of the day and the moment, the minute, is often stored somewhere bioenergetically meaningful, which is often in the related muscles or anywhere along the channel of the meridian, unless the anger is hitting overflow. And well, have you ever stayed at an overflow campsite? It's just not as good. Just never seems to be as good. I'm sure there's lots of exceptions, but just go with the metaphor. Yeah. So these exceptions, not the exceptions, these overflow areas are challenging for the body to process and release anger out of, because it's not a natural place for it to be able to do that with greater ease. So some of the areas where anger is commonly found with those associations, let me start with the yin, the liver meridian, is the rhomboids. The rhomboid is a muscle between your shoulder blade and your spine, as well as the pec major, especially where it attaches onto the sternum here. Now, this is a really juicy area in terms of where the kidney meridian also runs. So yet another overlap between fear and anger, and how they often can be seen arising together. Okay, let me head into the gallbladder and the muscles that it works with. It primarily works with the anterior deltoid, okay, and then a muscle within the back of the knee, okay. So not as, concentrated, typically speaking, there, but this is commonly an area over my years of Body Talk where I see people want to like collapse and roll their anger or whatever that is that's in combination with it. And they often want to hide it. So they'll often like roll their shoulders forward. And there's enough of that, then they'll end up kind of collapsing, and the weight of that anger or the fear of expressing that anger more so keeps the body in this kind of hunched over, rolled in position that I'm having a hard time really replicating very well. I hope you can see that a little bit here on the camera. And that's a really, really common posture that I see in particular in the feminine body. So it's interesting that it's masculine anger, that the feminine bodies, the females, don't often have that same understanding of how can I release this in a way in our society that feels socially acceptable. And well, that's a dicey thing to do. So this is a really common area to have chronically out of alignment, to have our shoulders subluxed. Subluxations is that full word. And it often makes it difficult for shoulder mobility to arise when we're carrying around that burden of the anger that we have no idea how to even release or how to express. Now, the good news is, because anger gives rise to movement and momentum, it loves to move. It's actually one of the easiest emotions to release. And we're going to dive into some work with that in just a moment. Last thing I'll tie in here are the astrological houses. So the liver meridian and the gallbladder meridian correlate to astrological houses. Astrological houses go through 12 phases. There's 12 houses in total. So they think everything in life takes a journey through these 12 phases. Okay? The gallbladder meridian, I'm going to start with that one first this time, is associated with the yang energy. That's that one. And it works hand in hand with the 11th house, And it gives rise to things like group consciousness. It gives rise to things like your aspirations. It gives rise to also how it is we relate to friendships, particularly more so like in the second half of life. This is less so about the friendships that you establish like in high school or earlier. Okay, this is more like when you're grown, maybe in your second half of life, and you are making different types of friends, usually ones that are a bit more in alignment with you. Although having said that, there's plenty of friendships that take the journey with us throughout our entire lifetime, isn't there? So this 11th house works with the planetary energy of Uranus and Uranus. However, we've decided to say that as a society. I think we're calling it Uranus. That just sounds weird to say, though, still. And also Saturn energy is in here. Saturn can be a bit of a harsh taskmaster, and Uranus can, well, be this delightful visionary, and sometimes it gets a little bit off the beaten path. So it can get a bit quirky. Yeah, I always think of Uranus energy has the capacity to dive into the unconventional, and there's a lot of wisdom in the unconventional sometimes. The unorthodox, the mystical side of life often holds even more gems of answers than regular ordinary consciousness some days, yeah? Let me talk about the liver. It correlates to house number 12, and house number 12 is the last one. It's about endings, releasing, letting go, and within that, releasing sometimes feels a little bit murky what it is we're letting go of. It can feel like we're underneath water. The natural planetary energy here is Neptune. Yeah. So the Neptune, think of the god of the sea type of energy. And looking at the bottom of the sea can be a little bit difficult to see. Well, a lot difficult to see. So sometimes it can feel a little bit like murky and confusing when we're in the 12th house and just figuring out what to fully release. And in more psychology lingo, it also works with the individuation process, or peeling back the layers of who it is you are not, so you can truly see who it is you are. Okay. That's the energy of the 11th and the 12th houses and how they tie in here. How am I doing for time and questions? I think we're doing pretty good. How do I describe smell and taste, like rancid bad cheese? Well, the smell, let me actually talk about both of them collectively at the same time. So I don't know if you've ever had rancid bad cheese, not like fully rotten, but just on the edge. I think of brie, like when you have that bit of brie and you're like, oh, that's not going so good. It has a very sour note to it. And so I think that the taste and the smell actually complement one another quite well. When anger doesn't get released, it creates destruction in the body, and it can come out in very explosive ways. And that in turn can lead to some bad blood or some sourness in ourselves and in how we're relating to others, if you want to think of it that way. And the rancid, well, if you were to just hang on to anger and hang on to anger and hang on to anger, well, things are going to start to decay. Things are going to go rotten. Things are going to become rancid. You can't hang on to that type of resentment, resending anger without it having a bit of a poisonous note to it. Okay. If you think of any situation in which you are feeling quite justified or maybe even righteous in your anger, we have lots of those usually, then you can see how, I think, if you feel into that for yourselves and your bodies, how that will lead to the feeling of having to carry this around, having to bear this burden, and it feels a little bit almost like a walking death in a sorts. That's maybe a bit dramatic. If we scale that back a little bit, it just creates this bitterness with life. And bitterness is also another form of anger. By the way, bitterness, anger, energy have a interesting tie-in, but I'll talk about that more so on day number 5, okay? And if I don't, remind me, I'll tie it in for you. So I think that you can see if you're full of anger, you have to carry that around all the time with you because you don't know how to release it. That's going to sour your experience of life and how it is you're living and how it is you seem to be interacting with your world. Yeah, does that make sense? Okay. Do I have suggestions as to what are acceptable expressions of anger? Let's get into the session, and I think that we'll see that bubble up. Yeah. And I actually started off, I think you may not have been on the call at the very beginning when I mentioned that anger processes really well with movement and momentum. We were doing a little bit of cheer dancing or get up on your feet dancing, and any sort of movement and momentum can help to release that. If you think of the best time to clean your house, is it not when you're pissed off? Yeah. So movement is a really easy way to give anger space to breathe and to be present to it. And in terms of, I'm sure you guys have all heard other suggestions and options of doing that too. So I'm going to give that question back to you as well. Just sit with it and see what feels right in your body mind to express anger. Yeah. And then we're going to do the session, and I can revisit the question at the end, and we'll see if that gives a little bit more awareness to it. Okay, great. I'm glad that helped with your earlier question about the smell and the taste. Okay, loves. I invite you, if you haven't already, to find a nice, quiet, cozy place where you can either sit or lay and be undisturbed for your session. And as you're settling in, perhaps beginning by means of breathing, there's something special about the breath. It's the only functionality in the body that you can consciously control and release, and your body will still do it all on its own. It's the only thing. There's something unique about the breath. And as you just start to mindfully breathe, know that you can make any adjustments to your body at any time now when we're working. I really want to start off by saying thank you. Thank you to all that's brought you here to do this work. Thank you for being here. Thank you to your families who gave support to you being here. Thank you for being here and being all of you. It's all welcome here. It's all welcome here. And as you're engaging with this breath, I'm going to invite you, as you take a few slow, deep inhales and exhales, to just gently feel the cushion beneath you. Just allow the body to be here as it is on this cushion without having to hold anything up, just releasing and allowing the melting into this cushion below you. Every inhale, an invitation to live, an invitation to life itself. Yeah, every exhale, an opportunity to release, to let go, to surrender, to disperse, to express. Without anger present, the breath wouldn't move. It's anger energy that's driving your very breath, that's flowing the blood through your veins, that's coordinating all the cellular activities that exist in your body-mind. So perhaps just touching in on what that means, that this may be a very potent piece to your life force energy. Yeah, it might be the thing that's kept you alive. I invite you just to gently scan your body mind, finding one area that calls to you, one area that calls to you as a resource that feels safe. An area perhaps where you most feel yourself. Yeah. And as you touch in on this area of the body mind, I invite you to breathe into it. Breathing into this resource of yours and allowing it to be supported by your breath. And just notice what happens. Just observing. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And you're welcome to touch in on this resource. You're welcome to breathe into this resource whenever you feel called to. It's always available. It might shift to another part of the body at times, and that's okay. You can find it there too. If it fades, it'll be somewhere else. I promise you that. start off our session today, the first thing that we're doing is a cellular repair, which is no small thing. It restores cells back to their fullest potential of health. And we're doing it for the diaphragm, your center of control, emotional processing. Also helps to work with holding, moving, integrating. Okay. So as we support this diaphragm, the regular breathing diaphragm is the one that I'm referring to. We actually have 4, but just the one at the base of the rib cage. As we run that cellular repair on it, I'm actually just seeing little spots that were potentially having to bear the weight of anger that wasn't allowed to even be stored in the body. It's almost as if there was a sphere of anger that was weighting down the diaphragm, almost paralyzing it. And as we work with this, we're going to also release this anger energy with cellular repair work and just repairing those spots where it got hung up on. We're going to also circulate blood through here. So one of the roles, FYI, of the wood element is to store our blood, which is far more than just the fluid that runs through our veins. It also carries wisdom that can help us to expand. Anytime we have access to wisdom, it helps us to usually expand our possibilities. As we run this cellular repair here, it's bringing in the quality of that expansion that's available now into the diaphragm and using it to embrace, reach out and grab that wisdom that's here on the other side of this. And as we work with this cellular repair, restoring the cells of this diaphragm back to its fullest potential of health and invite in that circulation of blood and wisdom here to support it. We're also running lymphatic drainage, which helps to release toxins, gunk, waste, low self-esteem, overthinking, overanalyzing. And we're doing that for the space between where the diaphragm meets the liver, which is on the right-hand side of the body-mind, just below that regular breathing diaphragm. And for this space between, it's got some stickiness. It has a few little adhesions and pieces of inflammation in there. So we actually need to release the adhesions, unwind the connective tissue, and bring in hydration, which helps cells to absorb water and joy and release any impurities that just don't need to be here. Okay, and now that's linking into another cellular repair. This is actually going right to the gallbladder. It's interesting to note that from a Western medicine perspective, they have noticed that it's really common for women to have to get their gallbladder taken out. Isn't that interesting? Again, this is a spot where masculine anger gets stored and an area where often we don't always feel so socially acceptable to express our anger. So as we're working here with a cellular repair on the gallbladder, it's being defined by the consciousness of stifled expression, and that's linking in turn into the throat and the throat chakra. I just hear it's actually including not just this lifetime, but going back 3 generations of ancestors, the feminine voice that had to be stifled and the rage because of that. And the feeling like I can't express this anger being overwhelming, so much so that it's actually also tampering with the capacity to get circulation of all the healing resources into that thyroid. Thyroid disease is also rampant amongst women in comparison to if we looked at women to men. So as we bring in circulation of all the healing resources through to the thyroid, we're bringing in blood that carries our passion, nerve our communication, lymph that drains toxins, gunk, waste, low self-esteem, overthinking, overanalyzing, chi or vitality, consciousness or awareness, right down to all the little guys, the electrons, the protons, the solitons, the neutrons. Also working with the sounds, the colors, the frequencies of all the chakras, major and minor alike, endorphins, hormones, and endocannabinoids that lower inflammation, anxiety, depression. They help our body to heal across most of the systems, but particularly nervous and immune. Also working with the balance of yin to yang and allowing this area of the body to receive yin and allowing for that yin to nourish, to nurture. to soothe, to comfort, to provide space and grace to all that's been here and all that's been learned to be here habitually, stifled expression amongst the female lineage. And actually amongst the male side too, looking at the women on that side of the family as well. Then we're running hydration, again, helping these cells to absorb water and joy and release any impurities that just don't need to be here. And then heading into that gallbladder one more time. We're going to be working primarily with rage and fury. Rage and fury, that's the stuff that it's calling in to work with today. Your gallbladder lives below the liver. So the liver, if I had my right hand just in alignment with my baby finger over my bottom rib, I'd be covering the liver. Underneath that bottom rib would be roughly where that gallbladder is. So here, I invite you to take a hand if that calls to you, if you feel open to do so. And just tuning in to this rage, this fury. And if it helps, you can pick one and focus on that. If you're present to both, then include both. And just notice what it feels like. Notice what it feels like. And if this anger had a taste or a smell, what would it taste or smell like for you, regardless of anything that we said earlier? What does it taste and smell like here and now? And if this anger had a sound, a word, a message, a noise, what would that be? And you're welcome to even say it out loud or express that note, tone, sound, noise verbally. Or you can just focus on the expression internally if that feels safer. And then, check out what this looks like. What's the visual that's here? Is there a color, a texture, an image of any sorts? One of the things that I'm present to, and I'll share it in case it's relevant for the group, is amongst the male lineage in particular, having to bear a stony affect and having to bear a stifled expression. And that tying into potentially the presence of a gallbladder stone or two, or most of us have a few more than that kicking around in there. Yeah. And as you breathe into this gallbladder and all the imagery, all the sensation, all the information that you're present to, imagine that you can intensify it and make it more seemingly real here and alive. Yeah, good. You're doing great. Now just notice how much is here roughly. This is roughly the amount of a ping pong ball, smaller, a tennis ball, a grapefruit, a volleyball, beach ball, or bigger. How much is here? And imagine that you can breathe into all of this energy, no matter how shaped and sized it is, and invite it into your hand by means of breathing. Yeah, that's the way. Get into it. You might even notice that the anger breath arises. That might sound something like in there. If there's sound that comes with your breath, that's fine. Invite it in and allow it to be here. And as you open up into this breath, when you have all of that anger present in your hand, I invite you to just simply scoop it and release it. In 3, 2, 1. Just giving that a few slow, deep breaths. I'll go ahead and tap it in on this end. You're not required to on your end unless you so choose to. Feel free to if you feel the call. And then I'll invite you to take a hand. If you need to do another scoop or two, feel free to make a pass. And getting any little dust bunnies, any little bits of rubble. Yeah, and then when you feel called to, feel free to take a hand right back into that area and just tune into it again. If it feels dark or empty or like a massive void of any sort, you are welcome to breathe in some sort of light to that. Sunlight, moonlight, white, pink, silver, gold lights. And if it doesn't feel like that for you, then no need, unless you also feel drawn to do so. And as you breathe in to this space in your body, just checking with all 5 senses once more. Sometimes certain senses speak louder at different times than others. However they're present to you, today is perfect. What does this area feel like now? If it had a taste, a smell, what would be here? Yeah, and if it had a sound, a noise, a tone, a message, a word. And then also checking in visually, maybe there's an image, a color, a texture. Just noticing what's different from before. And then we're going to connect this region of the gallbladder to, interestingly enough, house number 5, which works with pleasure and play. It works with the house of the inner child. And kids are really great at being able to express anger in the moment. Not always convenient for the adults in their lives, but they don't have the same filters or inhibitions yet. Yeah, so they're really great at expressing that temper tantrum, releasing it, and 12 seconds later they're off playing with their favorite toy again. So perhaps bringing in the wisdom of that little one, bringing in your inner kiddo wisdom. And if it calls to you, I invite you to bring in your little one at any age and just see how old they are here in this moment. Yeah, whatever age they arose in, it was perfect. Here we're actually addressing a fear of being punished for playing, a fear of being punished for playing, which actually inhibits the natural movement and momentum of anger. Anger moves much like play energy moves. Anger might be the drive behind play. Probably never thought about it that way. Yeah. So perhaps a socially acceptable way to express anger is via play, dance, sing, move, express, verbally, non-verbally. Okay, and at that age where this fear set in, There was also a crossing, a violation really of boundaries of some sorts. It doesn't have to be big, but there was a violation of some small thing where you learned that, or maybe it was a big thing, where you learned that your needs were important and you were to capitulate, you were to submit, you were to accept without question the state of affairs as it was, leading to a propensity at times for even gullibility or blind obedience that comes from that if there's enough of it. So some of you may be present to that as well here. That's normal. Some of you may not resonate with that, and that's fine. Just leave that. And within this, there's anger around being forced. And that anger is more so stored in the liver, just above that gallbladder. Being forced to ignore your own needs in favor of some higher authority, being told that you're not good enough inadvertently within that, being told that you're small, little, your voice, your needs don't count. And within this, there's shame that we need to release. And it's just a cycle of shame that's passed down through the generations, through the family lines, through the cultural, societal norms that get propagated in cyclical patterns. To support this, we're running lymphatic drainage through the liver, and I see it going in the spaces between the cells, which is a sneaky little spot which we don't always consider. The interstitial is the fancy word for that, spaces. It seems to be these little areas where anger got hidden in a way that it wasn't allowed to be seen, or it got hidden away from you, in fact, potentially. This might be very unconscious and subconscious, pick your favorite wording for that. Out of this idea that this anger is just too dangerous to even be present to. I can't think like that. Who am I to rock the boat? My survival depends on not rocking the boat. And as we work with this myriad of collection of beliefs, it's now linking into a fear of anger, just to be afraid of anger in and of itself. And inadvertently teaching a fear of power, a fear of your masculine power, a fear of your feminine power. And it's linked at the same time as this to a shackle around the throat. And I see it hooked into C7 vertebrae, which governing vessel 14 acupuncture point hangs out here. This has very strong yang energy. In fact, it supports the health of all things yang or masculine in the body mind. And if we have a fear of the masculine expression of anger or a fear of the masculine in anger, we'll often see issues related getting stored here. So much so that if you've ever seen women as they age, or sometimes they're not even that old, they get a bit like a hunch right around that neck, a kyphosis is the fancy name, or they end up with this buildup of a fat pad around there, and it's kind of like soft and mushy fluid that always seems to be there. That's a sign of people needing to protect themselves from this energy. So this is a really powerful acupuncture point. I see this come up a lot. Okay, so governing vessel 14 runs in that primary masculine meridian that runs through the midline of the back body and governs all things yang, all things masculine. So as we unhook the shackle here from the back of the neck is where it's hooked into the base of the spine there, or the base of the neck, we're opening up and releasing and allowing this masculine energy to feel safe, to be respected as safe, to be dignified. Yeah, and when we treat masculine energy with respect and dignity, it can't help but provide and protect and procreate nicely with the feminine. And then the feminine can't help but nurture and nourish the masculine. So think of this as, in a way, sending your body to couples therapy. your inner masculine and feminine, and allowing that dance to be. Oh, that reminds me of a poem by Viktor Frankl. I'll find it and I'll share it perhaps tomorrow on the call. So this hook is just ready to go on the back of the neck. If you feel drawn to, you're welcome to take a hand there at the base of the back of the neck. You'll feel that vertebrae stick out just a little bit more. That last vertebrae has a bit of a knobby bit. So that's how you can identify it easily. And that's where this acupuncture point is roughly. Okay, so I'm just going to unhook this in 3, 2, 1. And as it released, it actually released a layer of needing to self-protect and protect self from its own anger. Protect yourself from your own anger. Yeah, all these divisions, compartmentalizations that have been created because of the anger can now be free. Yeah, and then if you take your attention back to the liver, I mentioned that these two worked in tandem, that piece that we just released from the back of the neck. This piece on the liver wants to do things just a little bit differently. I invite you to just breathe in warmth. The warmth from your own hand, potentially, if it's here. And to breathe in the energy with this of the planet, the sun. The sun connects us to our fullest life force potential, the sense of who it is we are as an individual, and allowing your individual expression to reach that pinnacle of your fullest potential. Yeah. And there's the capacity now, as that's breathing into the liver, for that liver to stand tall and to, I keep coming back to this word, dignity, to reclaim its essence, to stand tall. Yeah, doesn't even need pride to do it. It just gets to stand tall and be. And as it stands tall, it releases another sneaky layer of self-protection in the form of self-importance. But I'm justified, I'm right in having this anger and carrying this anger and beating everyone around me with the stick that I carry with my anger. If they cross my line, if they cross my boundary, if they cross my path the wrong way. And then that just creates the cycle of having to prove how right you are in your anger by drawing more and more situations to you so you can continue to prove how right you are with that anger. Anybody relate to that cycle? Yeah. And just treating that cycle with the tenderness and the understanding that it was here to serve. It was there for a very good reason. And those reasons likely made a lot of sense. However, now it may be time for a new story. It might be time for new reasons, new things that make sense, new meaning. As I release this piece, I invite you to breathe deep into that liver. We're going to unwind the fascia and do a sweep all at the same time. So if it feels right, you're welcome to use your hands to gently release this anger. Feel free to connect to it with all 5 senses, just like we've done before. If there's a feeling, a taste, a smell, a sound, and I invite you to express that inwardly or outwardly. Maybe there's an image, color, texture. Breathe into all that you've observed, making it more seemingly real, dense here. And as I peel this off, I'm also unwinding the connective tissue of the midline of where the liver crosses the midline of the body and gets entangled just a little bit with the core energy that's meant to run through the center of you. It was wrapped around that core energy, which is your, inner light, if we want to call it that. the Taji pole, the crossover between the chakras and the meridians. All sorts of names to refer to this. And as it releases off of that, it actually allows for liver energy to be able to rise up to the parts of the brain that work with memory. Nice. Okay, this is now ready to release all the way, giving this all a few slow, deep breaths. I'm going just a little bit slow. The anger is fine to release easier, but I'm just unwinding some connective tissue along the way here, this path of the liver, making sure no stone gets unturned. No little bits of anger getting stuck in adhesed tissues, twists, torques in the sneaky places in between those cells. Yeah. Giving that another slow, deep breath or two. And again, connecting to any noise, sound, expression that may come out, if that feels supportive for you in your process now, today. Nice. Give that a few slow, deep breaths. I'm laughing because as I released that, my scarf got tightened and I was thinking about the shackle that we'd released earlier from that exact spot where my scarf got tightened. No mistake, these things. And just giving that another slow, deep breath. We're going to connect the right ovary to the right liver. The right ovary in general is the area of willpower, of survival, and it works with will, not in like, I can't eat that, that cookie because of whatever reasons we've decided we can't eat the cookie, and you have to struggle against not eating the cookie. This is more the will to live, the will to have that life force energy be present and alive and expressed and embrace that capacity for it to give rise to new birth. And as you breathe into your body-mind, I invite you to just give that attention of what's possible, what's ready to be born. And that's linking into governing vessel 20 acupuncture point in the center of the crown of the head, which governs our habit patterns. It's also the crown of the head, which correlates nicely to crowning, birthing. And in this area, we also, of course, have the crown chakra, and the liver meridian is rich. It's very, very rich right around this crown. So if we're prone to liver issues, we might be prone to headaches and migraines and things like that are here. Okay? So what I'm seeing here in this crown is releasing of old habitual tendencies to use anger in the way that you have, to justify, to prove, to hang on to resentments, to be right, to be afraid of it. And as we release those habit patterns, inviting in what's ready to be born with this spaciousness, with this expansion, with this expression of standing tall here. And even if you don't have an idea of what that is that you can verbalize or state or sum up cognitively, I invite you just to breathe into the energy of that. You don't need to know what it is. Sometimes not knowing is more powerful. Often not knowing is more powerful. And I just see that connecting to the top of that Taji pole that I mentioned earlier, the crossover where chakras and meridians meet each other, forming the core of the center of the light that is you. And I see that going all the way through the body, lighting up like a Christmas tree. In a soft, gentle way. So it's going to turn on at a pace that works for you to stay safe and feel safety in this new life force energy that's present, that's available here. As we do that, linking into the feet, giving them permission to play, to move, to have ease, to connect to Mama Earth, connecting to Mama energy. Yeah. How much play, how much pleasure would your feet like to have? Feel free to give them a little like wiggle woggle, tap dancing type of motion and invite in new life into these nerves that are here. It's one of the areas that are incredibly rich with nerves. And as we do that, I just see this release of responsibilities of having to have a plan and a focus to keep you alive. And it's just allowing for all that's catalyzing your decisions, all that's catalyzing that energy of planning to come from this place of play, releasing the consciousness of seriousness from both shoulders. And I'm just going to tap that all in. Feel free to give that a slow, deep breath. And just giving that another gentle, soft breath here. Welcoming this new life, this new capacity, this new birth that is you. In the same way that you would welcome a newborn, a little one, into the world. Consider that to be, if it calls to you, a possibility to continue to explore after this call, along with the other elements of play and movements. Another easy way to integrate body talk is with Cortices Technique. And if that's unfamiliar territory, you can check it out on either of the websites that I mentioned earlier. And in addition to that, there's a technique called Diaphragm to Intestines. You can use it whenever you're feeling those emotions arise and you need a little help in processing things, especially if this stirs anything up for you. And all it looks like is taking a hand to that regular breathing diaphragm, sweeping it to the intestines, and then using a hand to tap over the three brains: head brain, gut brain, over the navel, heart brain. You can do it in any order that you so desire. You're just saying my personal bias and tapping the gut first. There's something pretty special about the heart. Yeah. So that if that's supportive for you, you can use diaphragm to intestines whenever you're feeling that onslaught of emotions begin to arise, if it's overwhelming in any way, shape, or form, if you're processing things and it feels like there's a lot there. Diaphragm to intestines can be very supportive. And this isn't really new. This is actually quite old. This is what we do with our littles all the time. We throw them over our shoulders when they're fussing, and we just gently rub their back body, moving our hand from diaphragm down to intestines, and we just don't even think twice about it. Yeah. So you've actually been doing this whether you knew it or not for a long time now. So feel free to embrace that consciously for yourself, your emotions, and all that you burst into. Yeah. So those are some ways to continue to explore and play. I'm just going to see if that helps out on the suggestions as to what are acceptable expressions of anger. If you want any more on that, let me know. And you're most welcome to all the thank yous that I'm seeing come in. Now, I have a favor to ask. If this work speaks to you in any way, shape, or form, I invite you to embrace movement energy and share it. I'll be posting this session just like I did yesterday on YouTube, on my Facebook, for ease of sharing to support that. And I invite you to share if that feels appropriate to you. And if it doesn't, no need, no pressure. But if it calls to you, I would welcome that. And it's a wonderful little support for small biz owners and entrepreneurs alike. Okay? And in terms of our series, we still have 3 more sessions left. The recordings are always going to be available on the site. Oh, thank you for all the shares. And yeah, you're most welcome. Yeah, you're most welcome. Thank you for showing up to do this work. Thank you for calling it in. Thank you for your courage, and thank you for your vulnerability in doing this. It's not necessarily sexy work that calls to everybody. So if you're here, it's no mistake. Yeah, you're no mistake. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Mwah. I'm going to stop the recording, and if you have anything that you need additional support for, you want to just say goodbye to and unmute yourself, you're welcome to do so.